The why for the Institute is really to make sure that more individuals see the middle-class way of life, the strong opportunity of careers in manufacturing, and that manufacturers of all sizes have the workforce they need to compete.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to this week's episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, Carolyn Lee, president of the Manufacturing Institute. Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ari. Happy to be here.
Listen, it's absolutely my pleasure. And it's the Made in America podcast. So we start off with the same two questions, Carolyn. What do you make? And why do you make it?
We make the future of manufacturing workers. So the Manufacturing Institute is the workforce development and education partner for the National Association of Manufacturers. The NAM is the nation's largest manufacturing association with 14,000 members across the entire country, representing the largest and smallest manufacturers across our sector. And the Manufacturing Institute has a mission of inspiring, educating, and empowering the workforce of today and tomorrow. And we do that to make sure that we are preparing a resilient and empowered workforce for the 21st century. Our jobs are changing. I know we'll talk more about that. So our focus is really making sure we have the people we need to succeed.
Which is such a hugely important topic, Carolyn. I mean, it's something we've talked about. Clearly, this show has been, just because we're in Connecticut and I've been here, it's really grown up mostly in Connecticut. Really excited to kind of get your national perspective. But this workforce challenge is a major challenge all across the country. And so I'm sure people are really interested to hear kind of what you guys are doing from a national level. So looking forward to getting into that. But that's the what. We didn't really talk about the why. Right. So why do you do it?
The why? Well, personally, I got started in manufacturing at a very young age. It's not illegal when it's your own children. And so my dad and grandfather had a small machine shop when we were young, very young, and actually for a little while here in Connecticut. And so we'd go in and do small parts and, deburr things or count pieces, throw out the quick dry. And the manufacturing we'd see then back in the 80s is very different, as you know, than the manufacturing we see today. So I grew up in a world where, manufacturing was kind of synonymous with the American way of life, right? Mm-hmm. Everything we had was because dad and my grandfather before him were manufacturers, and a great middle-class family way of life. And I also had this knowledge from a very young age about the importance of manufacturing in saving the world. U.S. manufacturing saved the world via the arsenal of democracy in World War II, and that's what got us through the other side. My grandfather would talk about how he kept changing jobs. He was a machinist after high school education, kept changing jobs so he could be drafted. Finally got drafted, finally got sent to Europe, sat on the side of a mountain in Italy after we had finished that campaign and during the early part of after VE Day. But it was always this idea of service and manufacturing at the center. So that's how I grew up. And I grew up mostly on Long Island, but did live here for a while in Connecticut. And so, when I went off to college, I had this idea of service. So I started in Capitol Hill after college, worked down in Washington, D.C. And once I left the Hill, I moved to started working in the manufacturing sector, representing manufacturers on policy and other work to make sure the manufacturing could succeed. So that's my personal why. But the why for the Institute is really to make sure that more individuals see the middle-class way of life, the strong opportunity of careers in manufacturing, and that manufacturers of all sizes have the workforce they need to compete. So the why of our sector, once you scratch the surface and help introduce it to people who don't know about it, is just truly tremendous. And, the careers and the pay and the benefits and all of those things, plus it's interesting and innovative, and it's a great place to spend your career. So that is the why for the Institute. And it's, as you could tell, I'm pretty passionate about it.
Yeah, it does come across for sure. I mean, there's no doubt manufacturing is absolutely so critical. And part of the whole purpose behind the podcast in general is to share the great things that are happening in manufacturing, that it's new, that it's fresh, that things are happening, but it is so critically important. I mean, everything that we have in our lives, right. Clothes that we're wearing, the microphones we're talking into, the table that we're resting on, all the phone that you're watching or listening to this on, the car, whatever, was all made somewhere. And if we can't make it ourselves, we're really beholden to somebody else. So our ability to manufacture things is just crucial to society. So no question there. I want to sort of maybe go big picture and we'll kind of get into some policy stuff. So first thing is you mentioned the National Association of Manufacturers, or people may know it as NAM. I think most people listening will know what that is, but maybe don't know the Manufacturing Institute. So you touched on it earlier, but maybe let's back up and just, what is the relationship between the Manufacturing Institute and NAM?
Sure. So we are a 501c3. So that means we are a public charity, and we're working with the mission of inspiring, educating, and empowering that next generation of workforce and our current workforce. The NAM is a representative of the manufacturing industry in DC. It's a leading advocacy powerhouse to really make sure that manufacturing's voice is being heard throughout our government, but is also working to develop all of the solutions that manufacturers need. So the news and insights, the public campaigns about what manufacturing careers are all about, and has an arm that's focused on advanced technology, 4.0 technologies, and advanced manufacturing, as well as a research arm. And so together, the family of brands that is the NAM, that includes the Manufacturing Institute, is really developing everything that manufacturers need to make sure we're on the cutting edge and ready to respond to the demands of our sector.
So the Manufacturing Institute, would you say, is the workforce development arm primarily? So what are the main kind of thrusts or initiatives under the Manufacturing Institute?
Sure. So we're cradle to grave. So manufacturing education from as young as kindergarten, ideally.
Really?
But yeah, I mean, it's really about how do we help companies reach out at young ages. Now, you've got to be in it for the long game to get a company to engage at kindergarten, but that is really important. But a lot of the work really begins in the late elementary school and middle school. We do things, we actually host the National Manufacturing Day platform is owned and run by the Manufacturing Institute. And that is really encouraging manufacturers of all sizes to open their doors and to bring in their community and show them what modern manufacturing is all about. That's one of our efforts. Creators Wanted, as we've, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in a little bit, is our nationwide public perception campaign to change the perception of manufacturing careers. Together with the National Association of Manufacturers, we've been in 8 communities in the last year and a half talking about manufacturing careers, bringing to life a one-of-a-kind immersive experience where students of all ages and parents and others that are interested get to come in and solve challenges in an escape room format in order to see kind of those fundamental things that are part of manufacturing, communication and teamwork, problem solving, and how many different things come together in order to solve and to build. And that's what's really at the heart of manufacturing. So that is our student engagement. We're part of the Discovery Education STEM Careers Coalition, aimed at developing STEM skills in our nation's educational system. So a number of initiatives in the student engagement, but that transitions into skills training. We run and have worked in the last several years to expand, actually almost double the FAME USA network. That is an apprenticeship program started by Toyota back in 2010 to fill their own maintenance technician needs. And that has expanded in recent years. We have over 400 companies in over 30 communities who are working together to develop and train that next generation advanced maintenance technician. It's a job everyone needs filled. You can't keep your shops running if you don't have these critical workers. And so the FAME USA network is really working together to build community-based, best-in-class, world's best, in fact, multi-skilled maintenance technicians. We're having conversations to expand that here in Connecticut. The high demand for manufacturers of all sizes to participate in that program, and that is a key initiative for the Institute.
The FAME, this is the FAME program?
Yep, that's FAME USA.
And so, just really quickly, if people were listening and wanted to get involved in that, how would they do that?
Go to fameusa.com, and you can learn more about it, and look forward to a future conversation here in Connecticut about how we could start a community-based model here in the state. And FAME, I should say, is the best kind of partnership. It is community colleges partnering with local employers together with the broader business community to make sure that the three-legged stool that is workforce development come together to support these individuals.
What are the 3 legs?
So you need that community. So your workforce boards, your economic development teams, your local chambers and local manufacturing associations is one leg. And then you have the employers. That's leg 2, who are committing and sponsoring these students to go through their 21-month program. They end with an associate's degree and 85% of the time with a job if they haven't been hired by one of the others in the program. And then also the community colleges, of course, who are training to the FAME method. And key to FAME, and this is truly what makes FAME outstanding and its outcomes, it is really heavily focused on manufacturing core exercises, what we call them. And what they are, they talk about everything from professional skills to safety to lean, the tenets and lean, so that you are entering a manufacturing career with deep knowledge of what manufacturing is really about. Plus, you're applying the learning that you have in your 2 days at school, which are full-time, over those 21 months in your 3 days a week at work. And
so it's like a work study program.
It is an apprenticeship program.
Oh, I gotcha.
And the outcomes are fantastic. We have been, this program has been operating since 2010. Opportunity America and the Brookings Institution put out a study about 2 years ago about FAME outcomes. And in Kentucky, from the same community college, those that graduated from FAME versus those who went through another program that had similar skills but not a FAME program, 5 years after graduation, those students who graduated from FAME were earning close to $95,000.
Wow.
And that was in Kentucky. So, the outcomes of the method is really, truly outstanding. And we've been really excited to expand that across the country and look forward to hopefully doing so here in Connecticut soon. But then it's also how do we expand the population of workforce? So veterans, you have over 200,000 folks leaving the military each year. Mm-hmm. Our Heroes Make America initiative are training those in the transitioning sector, and as well as fully separated veterans who are looking for new careers. And we're training them in manufacturing skills, giving them career awareness, how to use LinkedIn, how do you do interviews, to prepare them for looking for a job and then help place them in careers. And we've been running this for about 5 years now, and it's been truly a wonderful experience. Every manufacturer you talk to, I started out by talking about arsenal democracy. There is no manufacturer who's not looking for somebody with veteran experience or military service, because they know how to work on teams, they know how to communicate, they know how to be trained. And those are all essential to modern manufacturing.
Commit to an outcome, show up on
time.
Yeah.
Show up on time.
Listen to directions.
Exactly. And so that has truly been a fantastic initiative, rapidly expanding to include the broader military community and help bring them into rewarding manufacturing careers. And then we have our Second Chance initiative as well, mm-hmm. helping those who have been involved in the criminal justice system find and build pathways into manufacturing careers. Manufacturers have been tremendously interested in this. Mm-hmm. To talk about the big data in a second about the number of open jobs, 1 in 4 Americans have had some level of justice involvement.
1 in 4?
1 in 4. So that may prevent them from being able to get gainful employment.
1 in 4?
1 in 4. So think about the number of people we'd be leaving on the sidelines if we're not building programs to help onboard them. And that includes changing the way we hire. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful opportunity for businesses to tap into untapped talent. And it's also not only good for the business, which it is, because the retention rates are super high, but it's also really good for the community.
Yeah, well, because having a lot of 25% of people being unemployable or only employed in very, very menial jobs is a big problem. But for somebody else to solve, how big is the team at the National Manufacturing Institute? Sorry.
So the Institute, we have about 30 staff across 12 states running programs on the ground. FAME is a platform, so we leverage a lot of technology, have a small team running a large network. Yeah. Our Heroes Make America, we have individuals who are all military connected themselves, a passionate team on the ground, and 4 bases running programs on the ground, and then a virtual program, as well as a broader support team there. So we are working, then we have our women's program. We'll talk about that. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, another program. So we do a lot with a very small team.
Yeah, you do. So let's talk about some of the challenges that we're facing from a manufacturing jobs perspective. So when we think about, you've got a lot of programs looking at, training folks who maybe upskilling or reskilling to get into manufacturing. We've talked about, getting more people interested in manufacturing. We talked about veterans. We talked about Second Chance. How many jobs looking at it, nationally, are there to fill in manufacturing?
Well, I think the most recent data showed it was about 770,000. It's, I think, 760 to 7,000. But over the last year, we have averaged over 800,000 jobs every single month. Going into the pandemic, to sort of level set, going into the pandemic, we had about 500,000 jobs open every month. For the previous year, coming out of the pandemic, we've been averaging over 800. There was one point last summer, we had 850,000 open jobs in the sector. And so when you think about the lost productivity, the loss in gains, the loss in individuals and their families.
Yeah, let's talk about,
Right.
a lot of us who in the manufacturing space and around it know about sort of the multiplier effect of manufacturing jobs, which is like way greater than almost any other sector, right? Every manufacturing job has like 5 generally that are supporting it from the services and whatnot. So huge economic drag, not having that. So, that's a massive hole. And when you look at sort of how we're going to fill that, it looks like we've got a little bit of, it's not a one solution. I can see it's a multitude. But what do you see as like the biggest hurdle to overcome? Like, is it the perception of manufacturing? Is like, what is the biggest hurdle?
Yeah. So I should say this first. One of the things that the Institute is best known for is our regular study we do with Deloitte on the talent gap. And this is kind of the preeminent study on the talent gap in manufacturing. And we're in our
talent gap?
Right now, we show that by 2030, we'll need to fill 4 million manufacturing jobs. Of that, 2.1 million will go unfilled because we don't have the people with the skills. And in 2030 alone, that could be $1 trillion hit to the U.S. economy of what we don't make because we don't.
Carolyn,
have
we're going to have to find some good news here soon.
Yes. So
go ahead.
But the thing is so perception. What's the biggest challenge? Well, perception, changing the perception of these careers for both students and parents. So, but once parents and students see the opportunity that are in manufacturing careers, and this is what we've learned on the road with Creators Wanted, is that truly like the door opens and the eyes get wide and they say, oh, wait, this isn't some 1950s assembly line where you're stamping a widget every day for 40 years, right? They see the opportunity that come with these jobs. When I talk to students, particularly high school students, about the average wages in manufacturing, their eyes light up and they say, one young man in South Carolina said to me this past fall, I'll be rich if I do that. Yes, you will. And so, there's a huge opportunity. And the most important thing here is that skills are the coin of the realm, not necessarily a degree. So there are many jobs, about half of the jobs that are open today need, actually a little less than half, need some sort of bachelor's degree or a higher level degree, but more than half of them don't. They all require skills. So these aren't, low wage, low pay, low aptitude jobs. They are high demand, high need, high skilled jobs, especially with the technology we have today.
High skill sounds like good pay.
That's good pay. And that is the silver lining on this. So once we start talking about it, and we got to brag in our sector, we don't always do that so well. And so we got to get better at that. And once you do that, the people will come.
Yeah, I completely agree. So from, and this, we hear this all the time, but so your view is the perception is what's going to prevent people from going into the space. Because to get these jobs filled, if you're projecting a 2 million job, shortfall in the not so distant future, the only way to fill that is going to be bodies who want to get in there. And so changing the view of what people could do is the key.
It's the first step. And then what you have to do is you have to think about, that's why, we talked about when I came in, I'm decked out in our Women Make America gear today because March is International Women's Month. We are building towards our largest event of the year, our Women Make America gala next month in April, where we will highlight women who are leading in the sector. And we launched a year ago an initiative, a campaign called 35 by 30. And so if we get to 35% of women in the sector by 2030, we will fill all of the open jobs we have because we have that much of an opportunity with reaching more women. So it's not only changing the perception, although it is, right? That's the first step. It's about building inroads and changing how we're recruiting to make sure that people of all all different ethnicities, all different backgrounds, all different skill levels see that there's an opportunity for them in manufacturing. So we have to think about how we're recruiting and what we're doing, because it's not like the conversations I'd have with my dad. I just hang a sign and people would come. That is not the world we live in anymore, as we all know. Yeah. So we have to think about how are we doing that outreach and how are we recruiting that next generation.
So what do you see when you take a step back and you think about the programs, and you've done a nice job of sort of like dropping names of different states all over, so clearly showing kind of your breadth of scope. Where do you see some of this working in particular ways that you would like to highlight?
It's really interesting what I've seen around the country. There are some great ecosystems, and you said at the beginning, Ari, that there is no the ecosystem is so important. Mm-hmm. And you say that and it sounds really kind of nebulous, but it really is. It's a partnership, right? Workforce development is a local and regional effort. We're a national entity, but we work locally and regionally to build that communication, to build that shared network. Here in Connecticut, there's a fantastic ecosystem. I've been learning that in the last year that I've lived here. And there's a fantastic ecosystem, and people are passionate about manufacturing in the state. And it's great because it's a smaller state, but with such manufacturing density, and everybody knows each other, I've learned. And so therefore, there's an ability to come together and build common solutions. I'm also seeing that down in the Southeast. It is boom time in Alabama. It is boom time in Texas. Every week we hear of another company opening or setting to break ground on a new facility in Alabama, Texas, in the Carolinas. And yet every time I read this, I think, where are they going to get all the people? Mm-hmm. Ohio has done a tremendous job too. We're partners with the Ohio Manufacturers Association, who is leading the charge in the state to build a manufacturing ecosystem, industry sector partnerships, build the learning, the muscle memory of all this workforce development. And we've been technical advisors and partners to them there, as we have in Alabama and are beginning to do that in Texas. So you have states where there's just a huge focus, and it is the regulatory environment. It is the tax policy. It is the incentives to bring and keep employers, but it's also the ready workforce is what makes the decision for companies about where they're going to invest. So looking at it from a state, federal, and local policy level is as essential as how do we build those connections from the ecosystem to build that talent.
So from a workforce capabilities perspective, like I'll just take Alabama, for example, like what do you see that they're doing in particular to help build the workforce to serve the needs of like factories that would open?
So the state, so many years ago, I was talking to someone in the state and they said to me that they had lost a competition for a very large manufacturer building a new facility about a decade ago. And that they realized then that they had an opportunity to improve their workforce development strategy to help attract that next. And so the state really dug in, and they've done a tremendous job of building a state ecosystem. The community college system is one system, and they came together to invest in fame across the state. At the high school level, they're having all high school students earn manufacturing certificates at the high school level while they're in school. And now they have a credential to come out into the workforce. Some are choosing to go on to college, and they have great universities in the state. I'm not going to get into football rivalries, but that's the thing. And then, but they also have a great community college system. And so the community college system chose, and they did this with the USDOL grant, to build out a statewide fame system. And we worked with them hand in glove to develop multiple chapters across the state so they could build that deep technical knowledge for those advanced maintenance technicians. But it's really the collaborative. There are thousands of workforce development pathways. There are, especially for manufacturing, right? There's thousands of different kinds of manufacturing careers, but it's coming together on core skills, and that's really important. It's coming together and saying we don't need to create it ourselves just so we can put our own name on it. It's about how do you solve the problem for the community? For manufacturers, we're all competing for the same talent right now. Mm-hmm. So the way that all ships, rising tide lifts all boats, the answer is we need more supply to meet that demand, and then all of us can get what we need. So it's that community and coming together to solve it.
So, when you're looking at sort of saying, hey, let's build this pipeline of people, it's really about just figuring out, listen, we're just going to build it, and and that will attract the jobs up front, as opposed to sort of like trying to coordinate it all at the same time. It's focus on the supply of the people. The rest takes care of itself.
It's kind of both, because you have the open jobs that are here now, right? I mean,
the jobs aren't the problem right now.
Not the problem at all. It's funny. A new colleague runs a state association who had just come into it, said to me last summer, so I'm coming to realize that workforce development is kind of like a bowl of spaghetti. And I thought that is the perfect analogy, because it is. It's hard to find the end. It's hard to figure out, okay, where's the one piece and how to pull it out, right? Watch a young child eat a bowl of spaghetti, and that is kind of the problem. But we have to do all of these things, but we have to do the smart things. So one of the other major roles for the Institute, and this is my favorite thing that we've been doing, is really, how do you highlight what works? How do you help replicate the learning? How do you pull out the solutions that we can teach one, see one, do one, right? How do we teach people to fish? And then we need to teach people to farm those fish. I'm going to get because there is no one thing. And if we all just focus on putting our own name, and we're a pretty small nonprofit, I guess we're a medium-sized nonprofit in this space, but if we just focus on having our own, we're never going to get there. Mm-hmm. So we need to say what works. How do we help more people do that? And then customize it for the local area, because what you need here in Connecticut is different than what you need in Alabama. It's different than Texas, right? The Texas is so big, you could put a couple of Connecticut's in it. So their needs are slightly different, more than a couple, right? But it's how do you come together? And that's to the benefit of the communities and that we live in. And you need all the partners at the table.
Yeah, it just always comes back to that, right? It's how do we get together to focus on the outcomes, not on who gets the credit?
Right.
And how do we work together? So you must run into that all the time.
I do.
And how do you navigate that? I mean, is one of the roles you find yourself playing referee? I mean,
sometimes it's referee. We're trying to play kind of I would say like nonpartisan. That's my DC.
I was going to say,
coming back.
You're letting your DC show.
Exactly. It's kind of how do you play the mediator, and how do you bring everybody to the table? Because we work so closely with community colleges and with credential certifying bodies and with employers of all sizes, right? And all the state and the vertical associations in manufacturing. We're kind of a neutral site to bring everybody together, because it is together that we'll learn and share. So a lot of times one of the growth focuses for the team and I in the last year or two has really been, how do we provide that platform for learning that everybody has a place at the table and everybody can come together, because no one person has a solution to anything, right? The best things that we make come from many hands, many ideas. And that's the whole story for why diversity and equity and inclusion matters, right? More ideas, more together. Bringing that to the table helps us.
So, I mean, the good news, right, is, they always say necessity is the mother of invention. So, nothing's going to make people work really well together than all having the same problem that can't be solved on your own. So maybe the size and scope of the problem is in itself part of finding answer to the problem. But are you seeing anything specifically, I'm not going to ask you to give me examples of people that were arguing that you got to see work together, because that's probably a little too much, though. I'd be happy to hear one if you want to break a story on this. But I'm just curious, do you find, for people that are listening that are feeling frustrated because they're not seeing people work together, or they feel like we're competing for the same pool of resources instead of working together, any techniques, anything that you've seen that's been particularly successful in bringing those groups together? You know what I mean?
Yeah, starting at a certain, right, if everybody agrees on one thing. So we have a great example of kind of building that common trust, because that's really what it's about. Down in San Antonio, Texas, there's a FAME chapter there. They've done a great job. It's a strong program, and but they had to start from scratch, right? Like all workforce development initiatives. And so they have strong partners in the area, and they came together and they started learning. They built trust. They were successful. And then it was, well, wait a minute, we're already doing this. Let's bring Second Chance as a regional initiative into that. You have a group of people who are used to each other, who knew how to work together. Yes, they're competing.
Found a little bit of success on one thing.
Exactly. And it's how do you layer and build from there? Because that is the common ground. but you also need people who have different expertise, right? It is hard to get into the public school system and help bring them into the conversation, but you need the school boards, you need the education and the superintendents, right? That is a whole thread of this work that is hard to do. And so you need people who already have a great, student engagement strategy. They can help you carry the ball. And now you might have a great community college strategy. How do you identify? So, one of the things that I like to talk about is why us, right? So when we started Heroes Make America, there was not another broad-based military to manufacturing initiative.
It's shocking, by the way.
They're specialized, right? One for machining that does a fantastic job, but it's not coming from any sector of the military, any role into get some core skills, really manufacturing awareness, and then find your way into the sector.
Yeah.
So we came to it from there's a gap, there's thousands of wonderful veteran service organizations and programs helping to transition and train. Credit to all of them. But there was a gap on broad-based manufacturing, and that's what we do. So we put this together and saw, why us? Because we are our mission is to serve the industry and to serve these military-connected folks in service of getting them, good careers. And so we saw a gap and then we built it. But then we've adjusted. When we hear something new or we have a new sector come to the table, we'll say, how can we help? And so there are times I'll refer people to Troops to Transportation, which is a great CDL program that one group is running. Fantastic. Everybody needs truck drivers too. So it's really how do you make sure
Which, by the way, it can be a manufacturing gap also.
Absolutely, because it's part of the
delivering process.
Absolutely. So it's how do we really think broad about it? And if we build it, they will come. And that has been something that we've really, Field of Dreams struck me hard as a kid.
Yep.
So, we built it and said, if it's the right thing, it'll work.
It'll work. Yeah. No question. So just a couple other things that were kind of coming to mind. You talk about second chance, and we've heard about it. We've recently spoke to, the Commissioner of Department of Economic and Community Development for state of Connecticut. She mentioned that. I had no idea 1 in 4. I'm still kind of flabbergasted by that number. Do you get a lot of pushback? Because I do hear, some people sort of turn a crooked eye at I just wonder your thoughts around and maybe help people who are listening understand how it can work and maybe not to turn a crooked eye at it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. When this idea first came to us from a funder, a social justice funder, we thought, will manufacturers do this? And, the necessity is the mother of all invention, right? As you said. So really, it was the demand is so high, the number of open jobs is so astounding, the overall labor force participation is shrinking in the country, right? So we're having this macroeconomic demand side pressure. So where do you find more people? And so that has really driven people to be willing to look at this. So now our model for second chance hiring is a bit unique. We partner with community-based organizations who identify those in the second chance community who are ready for work. And so take a goodwill.
So you're just to back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
So Carolyn, you don't just go to prison and be like, raise your hand if you want to get a job.
Right.
There's some vetting system that sort of, you're not going to end up with a third-time murderer who accidentally ends up on your shop floor.
It's really funny. So we'll come back to so this is always one of the questions that come up when it's okay, there's a population, it's a large one, that's interesting, but we don't want people with these past criminal histories in our shop. And then what you hear from those who are deep in this space, they'll actually say that murder is the least likely thing for anyone to do again because it's usually a crime of passion. So put all those statistics. There's a fascinating book. It's called Untapped Talent. Untapped Talent, and it is by Jeff Korzenik. He is the Chief Investment Officer for Fifth Third Bank. And on the side, he is a passionate advocate for second chance hiring. So it's a great book, great read, and really talks about the business case here. And that is what we lead with. But how we run our Second Chance initiative is we work with community-based partners who identify those who are ready for work and who have come out of serving their time and are looking for their next step. And so Goodwill is our partner in the Atlanta region. And they are identifying through their own work and then helping with some basic job readiness training. But the thing is about the second chance population is very often, sadly, this might be the first job these individuals have ever had.
I was thinking the
so you've
same
got to
thing.
give them those basic, this is how you show up on time. If you have an appointment, you don't just disappear. You tell them, and then it's okay to come late or to come back the next day. Basic things that you don't know if you've never had a career or a role model with a career before. So they give them...
That many people listening
right.
wouldn't even think someone needed to
Exactly.
learn because you learned it at home, but they didn't have that.
They might not have that. And so those kind of norms, workplace norms, are really big. And so we work with these community-based organizations who then are able to give those supports. And then we help manufacturers with how do you look at your hiring process? What are the requirements you have on the application? How are you going to give some flexibility to these individuals so they could go and have that meeting with their parole officer or with their lawyer or deal with child support? All of those functional things that employers do, there are ways and supports that you can get to make it more feasible for you to be able to have this load, that it's not a burden. It's actually a way that you can engage this population. So it's really utilizing those tools that already exist in the community and bringing them together with manufacturers to learn this. Now, here's the great news. The data on those who are from this community who come into jobs and their retention rates is astronomical. It's like over 80% because there's a loyalty for people that people feel for this company that gave them a chance. So we've had hundreds of manufacturers come to us to learn more about this. We have dozens who are engaged in pilots right now or in their own building process within their company. And it is a fantastic way to fill some of your jobs, but it's also a great thing to do for your community. And now I will also say for a moment, there are some great in-prison training programs that are going on across the country. I've seen a couple, got to tour some actually in Indianapolis a couple of years ago. And it was, that's really important work. And not every state has that happening. That's not the path we chose, but there are some great options. So you might be able to get some talent who are coming out of their time who have some of these skill sets. And so employers should really be open to looking at all of that.
Well, I mean, you did hit on a few things that I think I hear manufacturers talking about, right? Certainly getting some preparation to kind of like show up to the job correctly, because it isn't just people in second chance that don't seem to have learned from home how to, just basic communication and job skills. So that's a plus. And retention's a huge thing, right? I mean, every position you retain is one less position you need to fill. Right. And I think we all know if we have a good employee, keeping them is way better than just trying to find someone to replace. So if we can make it work. So, want to talk, you're wearing your Women Make America jacket.
Yep.
We all kinds of like women focused stuff because we are in International Women's Month. Is that what it is? International Women's Day, which is a few days ago. I've been really blessed to have had so many people come on, talk about women in manufacturing. We've had the local chapter head for WIM on the podcast before. We've got some amazing women manufacturing leaders that have been on the podcast, both running manufacturing companies as well as groups. And so like I'm seeing from my own experience, a lot more women in manufacturing than ever before. And I just wonder, is that something you're seeing nationally? I'm sure we could do more, but maybe just give me your perspective.
Sure. So we are at a high right now. We have 29% of the sector is made up of women.
Wow,
when we
that's
start,
more than I thought you were going to say. That's great.
It's better sector by sector. So there are some, so oil and gas versus transportation versus chemical. There's some variability, but overall across the entire manufacturing sector, we're at 29%. It is higher than it's been. When we started our Step Women's Initiative that we now renamed to our Women Make America campaign, we started at 24%. So we're adding thousands of women. And when you think about the fact that, I remember being a kid and my grandfather saying, oh, there's no place, for you. And he was a wonderful man. But the idea that manufacturing isn't like a burly job anymore, that you have to be a burly man to lift and put, in the back. There's so much more technology, right? There's automation, there's automatic loaders. The jobs that I saw happen when I was young don't happen the same way anymore, right? So there's a lot of more opportunity. And here's the good news, right? Manufacturing has changed as we've become more modern and more technology driven, of course, that there's actually a place for everybody, regardless of ability. And we have great partners out there who are doing great things with people of differing cognitive ability and physical abilities. Plus, you can work longer. So we have a whole study on older workers because it's not a physical labor job anymore. And so therefore, you can be in your 70s and stay in. So that has definitely opened the door to bringing more women in. So there's small things you can do, like making sure there's a women's locker room or restroom near the shop floor. Basic, small steps.
Basic stuff.
But what we've learned in our work over the years, and we have the largest national program to develop women for the sector, it has been the mentorship, the role models, having the leaders, that network has really been the thing that women have told us for over a decade now that they need to come and to stay. And so Women Make America is really focused on building that network, highlighting those leaders, and then having them be the ones who are empowered to pay it forward, to bring that next generation in behind them. So now our mentorship program is reaching into high schools and community colleges and universities to help recruit, give women who are studying still that opportunity to connect with women in the sector so they can come and stay.
Yeah, that's a whole, chicken and egg conversation that I think I've sort of had before and certainly thought about all the time is like, you sort of want to see somebody who looks like you,
right,
who's doing the job that you want to do. And so you tend to, that's why sort of, one begets the other. Plus also, I think we all know that getting a referral for an employee is a great way to get a great employee, right? And
right,
people tend to refer people that are like them because we, whatever. So just how it sort of happens. Right. And so it's really interesting that you've talked about that mentoring thing being so critical. I can see that. How do you sort of get the ball rolling on that, right? Because if you don't have women in leadership today, right, it can be hard to see that. And so you sort of talked about it there, but maybe elaborate a little bit.
Yeah,
on
absolutely. It's a great question. So we have 1,100 women who have won our Step Women's Award or our Women Make America Award, as we call it now. And so that population are women who were already in the sector who are leading. We have 100 winners every year, and then we have 30 who are leaders in the sector, and then we have 30 emerging leaders, so think 30 under 30. And so over the decade that we've been doing this, we have this whole population of women who are eager to engage. So we've got the mentors lined up. It's really how do we recruit that next generation who are looking to be mentored themselves, and then how do you prepare them to be ready to make the best out of that experience? So using the women that we have engaged through our Creators Wanted campaign or through our local regional efforts on engaging women locally, how do we recruit them in so that they have that network? So it's really talking about the opportunity.
So sometimes the network actually comes from outside the organization, right, and you could be mentored by someone. So if I know I want to create a pathway and I've got some women in my shop, but I know that I don't maybe have the leadership to show them, you could reach out to the Institute, for example, and like connect with people in other organizations to give them that mentorship.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is over 65% of men have been formally mentored in their career. And that is like the inverse for women. There's a dramatic decrease in the number of women who have been formally mentored. And that really limits their growth. Mm-hmm. So it's really, how do we give them a place to go? I often hear from women, particularly women executives and leaders who are doing amazing things in the sector. They'll say to me, but there's only one of me. And there's so many women in my company. So it's really, how do we share it together? And how do you give them a broader connection so that you can hear, okay, this is other people's perspectives outside my own company. And we have a whole platform. We're in our second cohort now. And it has been a truly remarkable experience for these women. And we look forward to those who have been mentored to be that next generation to bring
right,
on
with the cohort that's even bigger, right? Because
exactly.
I certainly know that feeling of like, and I've heard women tell me about it. It's like, I want to help, but I feel like I get asked all the time.
That's right.
And I do have things besides, that. So listen, as we're sort of wrapping it up, Carolyn, I wonder if you could kind of give me, from your perspective, your outlook on our ability to do the things we need to do to close the million job gap or the multi-million job gap that's sort of coming in the long term, and maybe also transpose that down to like being able to close the short term, 800,000 job gap that we see today, so that we can start shrinking the problem.
Yeah, I think that there's so much there. In the macro, we need things like immigration reform. We need to look about how do we grow our population, because the trend, we are an older population. We're having less kids as a country. population growth is going to come through immigration and in large parts, just like it has throughout American history. And so we need to look at that. That's a macro. That's something the National Association.
I'm going to go back to you, but I think we need to double down on that, because I don't know how many people are sort of studying or getting engaged and just in general on what's happening with sort of population trends across the globe. It's a massive problem in China. Germany's going to have a major problem where Japan, where they're just the replacement numbers just aren't there. And so you're getting an inverted population triangle where like each succeeding generation is actually smaller than the one that came before it. And that is a massive, massive problem. Look at any community that has a lot less people than it had a half a century ago, and you can see what can happen. So
that's the macro, right? And then things like childcare support and making things that you need to make it possible for people to work. So that is childcare is something we're working on at the Institute. The National Association of Manufacturers leads the charge for manufacturers on immigration reform, but that's kind of the macro picture. But then it's also things like we've got to open the door and bring people in. We have to look at things like high school internships. And many employers are worried about that because child labor laws, which are super important, not saying they're not, they're critical. But there are ways to do so, to bring in the next generation of students. And that's to do the tours, right? To do the career days, to take the time to invest in in those students so that they see that the population, that they have a pathway in. So there's like everybody can do that. And if we all do it, we'll start building that pool. So we talk about the opportunity in the sector. But then it's things like, who's the best advocate there? It is not you and I, right? We are people's parents. We are old, and not, you said earlier, people go to places where people look like them. Mm-hmm. So send in your 22-year-old employee, right, who came from that high school. Send in somebody who's a person of color or a woman, so that it appeals to people who are in different demographics. Because manufacturing is older, whiter, and more male. We need to think about how do we break the trends and send in those ambassadors so that other people can see themselves here, right? You can't be what you can't see. Mm-hmm. So you got to do those things. But then it's the articulate the skills. Think about, does your job posting need to say bachelor's degree? It might not. And you are limiting yourself to who you're recruiting by some wording you use in your job postings. So think about that, right? Go to a community college to partner with them who isn't the community college you always go to, right? Broaden your horizon, reach out to more folks. Think about and this is a near-term thing. We saw a huge dislocation in the service sector because of COVID. There are some skill sets in service sector jobs that apply to customer service and manufacturing or to production jobs in manufacturing. Think about that. We had a cook once from the Army who came into our manufacturing training program who got a job in the sector because if you think about what did she do? She worked on large equipment to produce a tremendous amount of product at very specific times, and she was a cook. So right. Think about, how do you look at
I always thought about that hospitality workers, right? Like you're thinking about from customer service, think about all the people that we had that were dislocated from like the hospitality industry, 100%.
Absolutely. So you have to think about how do you build new pools? How do you build more talent? How do you focus on the inclusion? How your current employees, you touched on this earlier, how your current employees feel about their job matters to whether you're ever going to fill those jobs, right? Because they'll help recruit people in, but if your bucket has a hole in the bottom, you're never going to fill the bucket. So, it seems enormous, but it's not. It's tangible. There are steps. We're happy to be a partner with this. The state has many great initiatives. I've gotten to spend time across the state with many leaders recently, and there's some great work being done. But it's identifying what your specific need is, and then learn about what is the first thing you should do, and how do you build, the pathway to that, filling those jobs.
Step by step, brick by brick. Absolutely love it. And, I totally love this idea of meet people where they are. I've talked about it all the time. And I've always thought that in today's visual world of like Instagram and TikTok, and where people pay less attention to words and more attention to pictures and tactile stuff, manufacturers have such a huge advantage because what they do is cool. Right. The things that they make are tangible, and the end pieces that they go into, are things that people can get, excited about, and getting the word out, letting people know what's there, I think is the most important thing to get them excited for the future. So Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
Well, listen, we're going to wrap it up. I do rapid fire round of questions for first time guests. So Carolyn, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So this is a very Northeast question.
Okay.
Red Sox or Yankees?
Yankees. I'm from Long Island.
Could take the girl out of Long Island, but not the Long Island out of the girl.
Right.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
Ooh.
Yes.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Beach.
Beach. There you go.
Beach is the answer.
Sports car or SUV?
SUV.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Ooh, that's hard. Untapped Talent, Give and Take.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
There's many.
There's many. All right, we'll take, that's two. That's good. Carolyn, if you had to do something other than be president of the Institute, and it could be anything, no holds barred, what would you spend your time doing?
Oh, the other thing I wanted to do besides policy at a young age was to be a chef. And so I do enjoy cooking and cooking with my kids.
Oh, there you go. Like a restaurant chef, something like that?
Yeah, I wanted to do catering. Mom talked me out of that. Nights and weekends, she said, nights and weekends. So I ended up in the manufacturing adjacent world, much to my father's joy. So yeah, but I wanted a little gourmet store.
That's what I
would love
see
that.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
I could kind of see that.
Yeah.
What's something that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success you've had?
How to play on teams, how to say yes, because you never know what's going to take you to, right? And being productive is important.
Yes, it sure is. Carolyn, what's something that you learned later in life or later in your career that if you could go back in time and tell young Carolyn, and if she'd listened to you, it'd make a real positive impact on her life?
It'll work out. You don't need the full plan because there are twists and turns that are interesting. So enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. Focus on the journey, not always so worried about the destination. Yep. I absolutely love it. Carolyn, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thanks for having me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.